Niels asked in the letter to make provocative or inspiration, so I thought I started provocation and leave the inspirations to my colleagues. And I do this because, of course, I'm one of the old guys here, and I probably am the one who has written actually most papers with authors of the Sussex Manifesto, with Chris Freeman, with Charles Cooper, with Hans Singer even, at some time. So I know the authors. And as a matter of fact, you should ask this to Martin Bell. I've always been extremely critical of the old manifesto all the time, while in Sussex. And to some extent, this is where I built my reputation as a very provocative and critical researcher, thanks to this Sussex Manifesto. So, in this, my provocation will be first that, you know, in many ways, if you think of it, the Sussex Manifesto formed the basis, and it had a major policy. In fact, it formed the basis of the self-reliance policies in Tanzania. It had this whole notion of technological independence in many countries, which fitted the whole import substitution, the Prebisch-Singer theorem, and the whole policy advice of Hans Singer on these lines. And so, to some extent, I wrote a critique in the book of W. Sears at the time when I was at IDS, which is a heavy critique of these notions of in the manifesto and the technological independence. In particular, the view that you could develop your science and technology base by yourself, that this was part of the independent, of course, at that time of all these colonial states, and that these new third world nations had to focus on developing their own science and technology focus. Now, I'm an economist, and as an economist, of course, we are sometimes pretty cynical, and we focus on trade-offs. And so the trade-off, my first argument, therefore, it would be very good if STEPS would do a self-evaluation study of the Maastricht Manifesto. In the policy field, we love it if we have somewhere an impact analysis. Now, we have 40 years of impact you can do with respect to this study. Has this Sussex Manifesto led to positive policy impact, and what have been the negative policy damages the manifesto produced? It would be fascinating to do, and you have even the authors there who physically are still there. So if they would be, you should challenge them and say, do once a self-evaluation study on what has been the impact of this Sussex Manifesto, and I would assume that policy researchers are keen to learn, so we can all learn from this. That's for starters. Now let's come to the second, to the new Sussex Manifesto. Well, the question is, what is really the terms and the words are very different, of course. In the old manifesto, we talked about science and technology to developing countries. Now we talk about innovation, sustainability and development. We talk, and of course, as an economist, I react, of course, to this, the shift towards the more political nature of innovation, the new treaties, direction, distribution, and diversity. For me, this makes all very little sense. These are all notions and concepts which, you know, I mean, when I talk about the direction of inventive activity, I go back to 1962. That's a concept which is quite well defined, which was the basis for all the missions, the Apollo mission, the various other research missions which were introduced at those times. So there is a notion at the moment in the European Union, we debate the direction of technical change with respect to the grand societal challenges. How do you organize this? You have a top-down vision, for instance, that you would like to do something about, for instance, the SET plan, the Strategic Energy Technology Plans of the Commission. How do you involve procurement in there to give a direction so that you get a demand-led, the famous lead market demand initiatives of the Commission are all focused on affecting the direction of technical change or inventive activity or even innovation. So there is a pretty clear definition there, and I think you mean something different with directions. You mean a much more aspect of where innovation should go in different directions than where simply market-driven it would go. And I fully accept that point, but I think it would be useful to bring it back to some of the notions which are known within the economic culture. The same for distribution and diversity. I won't go into this. But what I mean is really that we all talk, at SPRU, at IDS, at my place, we all talk about the same thing, which is basically innovation for sustainability. And these are the core issues. And what is behind this are two main things. One, innovation, that is that we don't talk so much about the old industrial R&D. Again, I refer to a recent piece in research policy with Chris Freeman, where I give an overview of the shift from industrial R&D to innovation. What is implied? This is this Mike Gibbons notion of Mode 2, the involvement of users, decentralized activities, the importance of design, engineering, the old science and technology service activities were of course part of what Chris Freeman produced and proposed to UNESCO in terms of the definitions of what afterwards was narrowed down to industrial R&D in the Frascati definitions of the OECD. All this is well known, but I would say this is a major shift which has occurred over the last 40 years, the notion of from science and technology to innovation, from industrial R&D to something which is much broader, much more difficult to grasp. And the second thing which has happened, of course, is globalization over those 40 years, and basically the physical insustainability of this trend at price and technology levels at the world level. And these are the two issues which for me are central. And by the way, this was also wanted to the computer, which was a project a couple of years after the Sussex Manifesto, was to some extent a similar expression of a major Sussex initiative. Now, given the time, I won't go into these sort of things. On globalization, I leave that for. It's just to note that, for instance, if you think of why globalization is unsustainable, it's basically because there are two major challenges. One, this is actually a picture coming from a colleague at Philips, Dorothea Seebolder from the World Council for Sustainable Development. And basically you have two major research and innovation problems. One is how do you get the rich countries on the right, in terms of how do you get their direction of research and innovation down towards a reduction in their ecological footprint, down into this sustainable development model. And secondly, how do you get development in a sustainable direction? In other words, that these countries on the left, these less developed countries on the left in terms of Green Development Index, do not grow in a sort of up to the top, etc. Now, is this feasible? That is to some extent the central question with respect to research. Let me conclude by saying that traditionally, and I recognize this very much in the table where you show the shifts, but which I would argue is today already quite well recognized. Traditionally, innovation has been driven by professional use demand, directed towards the tip of the income pyramid. I'm sure that my colleague will enter into some of those discussions. In a global setting, this has offered growth expansion opportunities to global firms thanks to rising income inequality in developed and emerging economies, because we now have high income consumers in China, in India, in Latin America, in some African countries even. The problem, the present crisis, shows that this is unsustainable and that you have to show, in the absence of Keynesianism at the global level, you're looking for long tails of growth opportunities elsewhere, and this is precisely where coming local grassroots innovations go at the income level. And this is where developing markets, and I'm just now putting this in straightforward economic terms, raise some of the most motivating research innovation challenges. So this has nothing to do with attempting at shifting it in terms of power relationships or political science, purely in economic terms. You have now on the demand side enormous markets emerging, whereby you have new motivating research challenges, autonomy, which is something which, we had autonomy with the freedom of movement as the motor car, as the most important aspect of autonomy. But you would like the same autonomy in terms of your mobiles, hence why mobiles develop so rapidly in Africa, because you lack the terrestrial high-quality infrastructure in ICT, but you would like the same thing in energy, you would like the same thing in water, etc. So in countries, in regions where you don't have the physical infrastructure, the high-quality infrastructures, unwired high-quality infrastructure, is a continuous pressure, a need-driven kind of element with respect to innovation in terms of autonomy. The same with respect to low education in most of the developing countries, hence the necessity of simplicity in use. Now, there is a famous firm in the Netherlands who uses simplicity in use as its slogan. It shows precisely that these are elements whereby you can see that these elements are all coming up. And that is why we get the interest, of course, from the demand side and from actually the business community. And whole issues there, how do we link it up to the NGOs, etc.